For a lot of heads, opening the attendance dashboard on a Monday does not feel like reviewing data. It feels like waiting for a verdict. There are some parts of school leadership that carry a distinctive emotional charge, and attendance on a Monday morning is one of them. Plenty of leaders know the feeling. You open up the dashboard, you wait for the figure to appear, and before your mind has even started to analyse the data, your body has already reacted. That is worth talking about because it shapes how leaders behave, and how they behave shapes how the whole school responds. There's a very specific emotional texture to the Monday attendance review. Before the figure's even loaded, some leaders are already bracing. It's not simply the number itself, it's what the number feels like it says about them or their school. And in many schools, that data drop has become symbolic. It stands for leadership grip, school culture, family trust, safeguarding vigilance, even professional competence. That is a lot for one percentage to carry at like 8:03 on a Monday morning, because attendance sits under so much scrutiny. The dashboard can feel like, less like information and more like judgment. Governors may ask, trust leaders may ask, inspectors may ask, and in the mind of the conscientious head teacher, a single bad week can start to feel personal. In leadership meetings, this can show up as a kind of emotional whiplash. A tiny improvement brings relief that is bigger than the shift itself. The small drop triggers a level of concern that would make sense if the school had fundamentally lost its way. That volatility is often a sign that confidence in the system underneath is not strong enough yet. The number you are judged on, but not fully controlled, well, this is part that wears leaders down. Attendance matters deeply, but the drivers of attendance are only partly within school control. Illness, poverty, anxiety, transport, family breakdown, local context, and the wider social strain all sit underneath the number. Leaders are therefore placed in a difficult position. They are fully accountable for a measure they cannot, or they can influence but cannot command. That gap between accountability and control creates a special kind of pressure. The danger is that leaders begin to overreact to weekly movement because the emotional stakes feel quite high. They read a wobble as a failure rather than as part of the wider pattern. And once that happens, the organisation starts chasing spikes instead of leading trends. Before we dive back in, I want to say something to head teachers listening. Attendance rarely improves through effort alone. It improves through clarity, discipline systems, and strong leadership alignment. Most leaders I speak with are working incredibly hard already. So if attendance still feels fragile in your setting, you can apply for the Senior Attendance and Leadership Resilience Check. It starts with a short strategic assessment. Eligible leaders are then invited to claim a fully funded strategic review process, typically valued at £1,000 for your school. This includes an on-site visit, a detailed school-specific report and follow-up strategy session, and a suite of practical leadership tools designed to help you move from a reactive pressure to a clear and sustainable plan. If that would be useful in your context, you can apply now through the link in the show notes or by scanning the code on screen. And now, back to the episode. Good leaders teach themselves and their teams to look at attendance the way skilled clinicians read symptoms. Seriously, intelligently, and in context, not dismissively, not sort of hysterically either. The stance keeps the organisation from lurching from reassurance to alarm every 7 days. Strong attendance leadership is not built on pretending that the number doesn't matter. It matters enormously, but neither is built on reading every weekly fluctuation as a referendum on leadership. Steady leaders learn to distinguish signal from noise. They read the trend, not only the spike. They ask what has shifted, what is seasonal, what is cohort specific and what may simply be a rough week rather than a strategic collapse. They also help their teams do the same. A calm, intelligent reading of the data reduces panic and improves decision making. It also allows the school to respond proportionately rather than defensively. A helpful discipline is to pair each weekly data review with 3 questions. What is new? What is noise? And what requires action? That simple structure helps teams respond with proportion. It also reduces the temptation to treat the dashboard as a moral verdict on leadership. It sounds like this is concerning, but it's not catastrophic. It sounds like, let us understand the groups, the drivers, and the patterns before we escalate. It sounds like we are not ignoring this, but we are neither letting one week destabilise the whole school. That kind of language matters because systems often take their emotional tone from the top. If Monday morning always feels like a crisis, the school will build a crisis culture. If Monday morning feels like a disciplined review of an important strategic priority, the school will be built on steadier habits. Over time, the aim is not to remove all concern. The aim is to replace dread with grip. Leaders should be able to open the dashboard and think clearly because they trust the system underneath the figure. What matters for leaders is not simply to agree with this idea in principle, but to build it into the habits of the school. The test is always practical. What will adults do differently tomorrow because they understand this more clearly today? One useful way to deepen this conversation is to ask what the Monday morning data drop looks like on an ordinary Tuesday, not just in leadership meetings. The strength of any attendance strategy is revealed in everyday routines. The tone adults use, the speed with which patterns are noticed, the consistency of follow-up, and the quality of relational judgment in small moments. That is why leaders need to keep bringing the issue back to the lived reality of the school day, rather than allowing it to sit only in reports, plans, and weekly summaries. There is also a capacity question underneath the Monday morning data drop. Schools often try to solve strategic fragility with additional effort from already stretched people. They can work for a short spell, but it rarely creates long-term stability. The more durable approach is to tighten the architecture of the work so that adults don't need to compensate for that ambiguity or over-dependence or drift through sheer personal stamina. Leaders who make the shift usually find that the school becomes calmer as well as more effective. A practical reflection for leaders is this. If you've stopped the team tomorrow and asked them to explain the school's current thinking on Monday morning data discussions, how aligned would their answers be? Where there is real strategic grit, people usually tell the same basic story, but in different words. And where the system is looser, then leaders think the answers begin to scatter. That simple test is often more revealing than other spreadsheets because it shows where the thinking actually is and how it's travelled across the organisation. Another important angle is professional confidence. When adults feel under-supported, they become more reactive. When they feel clear and well held by the system, they become more thoughtful. Good attendance leadership, therefore, doesn't only challenge what is done, it challenges the confidence with which it's done. That confidence is built through clarity, repetition, modelling, and the experience of seeing sensible routines work over time. It's also worth remembering that none of this is separate from school culture. Attendance is never only an attendance problem. It is connected to belonging, trust, classroom experience, family relationships, leadership steadiness, and the overall emotional weather of the school. And that is why the strongest leaders resist narrow technical fixes. They understand that the number on the dashboard is being shaped by a wider human system every single day. So as you listen back to this theme of Monday morning data drops in this episode, the most helpful question may be, what would it look like for this to feel steadier, clearer and less dependent on constant recovery? In many cases, the next leap forward doesn't come from working harder at the same response. It comes from redesigning the conditions underneath that the school can lead with more confidence and less strain. If Monday morning currently feels like judgment rather than information, that usually tells you something about the fragility of the system underneath the number. The steadier the underlying strategy becomes, the less the weekly data will feel like a verdict. And that is one of the clearest signs of a healthier attendance culture. If today's conversation resonated and attendance remains a pressure point in your school context, you can apply for the Senior Attendance and Leadership Resilience Check. It begins with a short strategic assessment. Eligible leaders are then invited to claim a fully funded review process, typically valued at £1,000, including an on-site school visit, a detailed report, and a follow-up strategy session and practical tools to support a clear 90-day plan. If that would be useful in your context, you can apply now using the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening and stay connected.